This is In the Loop. I'm Christian Bryant. If an office plant falls in an empty office, does it make a sound? I can report that yes, it does, and I have a little something to clean up after the show. Tonight, there's a lot going on in American crime and policing, from Seattle to Chicago. We're breaking it down. Then, we'll cover the push to bring back college football and the risks weighed by schools as they consider canceling their season. But first, tonight's top stories. The speculation is over. Senator Kamala Harris of California will be Joe Biden's running mate on the Democratic ticket. The Biden campaign announced the VP pick Tuesday afternoon after keeping folks guessing for weeks now. Since ending her own presidential campaign last year, Harris has pushed legislation on racial justice. She's a former prosecutor and generally a pretty moderate Democrat who won't do much to fire up the Democrats' progressive wing, but could help drive the black vote in November. And she's generally pretty good with a crowd.
To the world and each other, right here and right now. America, we are better than this.
Harris will be the first black woman and the first person of Indian descent nominated for vice president, or actually for any national office, by either major party. In a move that's raising some serious concerns in the worldwide medical community, Russia approved a coronavirus vaccine before completing its patient trials. Russian President Vladimir Putin says the drug, named Sputnik 5 after Russia's space race victory, works, quote, effectively enough. That's comforting. The Russian Direct Investment Fund says it already received interest from more than 20 countries for more than 1 billion doses. But the vaccine hasn't gone through its final phase of testing. The first two phases test the vaccine on small groups of people. The third phase does so on thousands of people to make sure it actually can prevent infection. Just last week, the World Health Organization said Russia needed to follow global standards to make sure the vaccine was safe and reliable before mass production. For the first time ever, 75% of the US can vote by mail come November as a result of states opening up new options for mailing ballots. According to a New York Times analysis, roughly 80 million mail-in ballots are expected to be sent in. That's double the number from 2016. Here's a breakdown. In 9 states and DC, every registered voter will automatically be mailed a ballot. 33 states are allowed to cast an absentee ballot without an excuse, but 8 states require an excuse other than coronavirus to vote by mail. For a vote to count, ballots will need to arrive at a state's Secretary of State office by 8 p.m. on election night. But there are major concerns that the U.S. Postal Service can't handle the flood of votes as it deals with funding cuts. To help, some states are using protected ballot drop boxes. Oregon and Washington have used them in the past, but critics argue that method is vulnerable to voter fraud, even though many come equipped with security cameras. Coronavirus cases aren't the only thing experts have been monitoring during the pandemic. Cases of violent crime have also been in focus, especially homicides. Across 20 US cities, the murder rate was nearly 40% higher in June than it was in May. That's according to information from the University of Missouri, St. Louis. Warmer weather usually does bring an uptick in violence, but this spike is steeper than usual.
We have 20 to 30 shootings a week in the Kansas City metro area. If you don't see a problem with that, like I said, you might need to reevaluate your thoughts and think about that.
Experts in criminology who study this aren't pointing to any one factor for the violence. We should also point out that violent crime nationwide has declined over the past few decades. Seattle's first black female police chief, Carmen Best, is resigning after the city council there voted to cut police funding. Her resignation will be effective in September. Seattle isn't alone. Police departments across the country are experiencing the same thing, with a national wave of defunding measures taking root during a very fraught year with protests focusing partly on police brutality. Newsy's Jamal Andrus has more.
Seattle's first black female police chief is resigning. This comes after the city council voted to cut about $3 million from the city's $400 million budget, including a major cut to the chief's salary. Seattle's budget cuts are just one example of defunding measures gaining steam across the country. The budget, which still needs to be approved by Seattle's mayor, Jenny Durkin, reduces the department's size by up to 100 officers, takes money from the SWAT and homeless response teams, and cuts the training and recruitment budget.
The idea of letting, after we worked so incredibly hard to make sure that our department was diverse, that reflects the community that we serve, to just turn that all on a dime and hack it off without having a plan in place to move forward, it's highly distressful for me. And I really, it goes against my principles and my conviction.
The announcement comes on the heels of a turbulent summer for the city of Seattle. As with many major cities, Seattle saw sustained protests in response to the killing of George Floyd. These protests culminated in an occupation protest in downtown Seattle that garnered national attention. The Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, or CHAZ, led to a public back and forth between Seattle's mayor and Chief Carmen Best.
I am very angry about the situation that we have, and at this point, we just want to make sure that it gets resolved.
But Best joins half a dozen former police chiefs from Louisville to Portland to Atlanta who have been either forced out of their position or resigned since George Floyd was killed. And data from the Police Executive Research Forum shows that nearly half of the 250 law enforcement agencies surveyed are experiencing some sort of budget cuts. While some departments like Seattle, Minneapolis, and Los Angeles are seeing less than 1% of their overall police budgets cut, New York has cut $1 billion from its $6 billion budget. Across the country, the idea of abolishing the police entirely is an unpopular one, but Americans generally support the idea of redistributing police budgets. According to a Newsy Ipsos poll, 61% of Americans support proposals to move some money currently going to police budgets into better officer training, local programs for homelessness, mental health assistance, and domestic violence. Jamal Andrus, Newsy, Chicago.
We're blowing the whistle on a quick timeout and a water break. When we're back, we'll fill you in on what's trending.
Miss getting email that isn't junk? You should know about Newsy's daily newsletter. It's breaking news right to your inbox. Get caught up quick with the best Newsy stories every day. Join us at signup.newsy.com. Be informed, not influenced.
Native women have told me that what you do when you raise a daughter is you prepare her for what to do when she's raised, not if, but when.
Why are we different than every other person? Why don't we have the justice everybody else does?
There are likely millions of things to read right now related to Biden's VP pick, but that doesn't mean we can't take a second to highlight what else is going on in the world around us. Here's what's trending. Like a lot of things, political conventions will look very different this year, and the DNC is first up. Democrats will hold their convention next week, Monday through Thursday, with a list of speakers including Bernie Sanders, Bill Clinton, both Barack and Michelle Obama, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and even former Republican presidential candidate John Kasich. Those folks will be speaking through a combination of pre-taped addresses and live feeds from across the country. So, no balloons or cheering delegates, but lots of green screens. And Kamala Harris was slated to speak before the Biden family on the last day of the convention before she was announced as Biden's VP pick. We're gonna pretend like we calmly did not read into that ahead of time, like Charlie from It's Always Sunny. New Zealand is trending after the island nation just detected its first virus cases in 102 days. 102 days in which life has looked pretty normal in the country. The Prime Minister announced 4 cases were detected Tuesday, all of them within one household. And she announced new lockdowns in the region for 3 days.
These 3 days will give us time to assess the situation, gather information, make sure we have widespread contact tracing.
So yeah, that's what it looks like when you have your act together on COVID. And in this world, nothing can be certain except for death, taxes, and reboots, apparently.
Remember all the dances we had in this gym?
A new Saved by the Bell series is headed to Peacock with Mario Lopez and Elizabeth Berkley playing gym teacher Aisley Slater and mother Jessie Spano, respectively, who knows a little something about addiction.
Are those caffeine pills? At first, they're so exciting. And then it gets even more exciting, but after that, it gets so scary. And in the end, you ruin your girl group's shot at a recording contract. What?
You gotta love the callback to Jessie's addiction episode.
I'm so excited! I'm so excited!
Mark Paul Gosselaar reprises his role as Zach Morris, the California governor who sends students affected by low-income school closures to better performing schools like Bayside High. The story of a failed education system makes me so excited. Both the Big Ten and Pac-12 conferences have officially postponed their fall college football seasons, hoping to play in spring 2021 instead. But there's still a considerable number of programs working to ensure there's still a season this fall. Our sports guy, Newsy's Austin Kim, takes a look at what that work entails.
The roar of a college football crowd will be noticeably absent this fall. That's one of the few certainties the sport has right now, as major conferences consider whether to play this season.
I love football. I've made millions of dollars coaching football. However, the reality is it just cannot happen right now under the present circumstances.
Former college and NFL coach Artie Gigantino says football presents a number of risks, such as the huddle, tackling, and even the playing surface.
When you go to an artificial surface and you fall down, you're spreading the disease on that. They are not going to come out and sterilize an artificial surface in between every play.
Football programs nationwide are putting more safeguards in place in hopes of keeping athletes safe. That includes more virtual meetings and frequent cleaning. But the games and practices are only part of the equation.
The risk is always what they do when they're off campus, because they can be monitored while they're on campus, to a certain extent, obviously, but you can't monitor them in the community.
The teams know the risks, but some of the biggest names in college football say protocols are working and it's worth starting the season. Some schools like LSU
breathe out of this thing.
Have rolled out protective face shields, ones developed for NFL players to limit the spread of droplets.
I think that that's actually a very important and encouraging mitigating factor if the players are able to wear them comfortably and if they all see the value of it in terms of keeping them safe.
And college football stars like Clemson quarterback Trevor Lawrence say players have an incentive to follow the rules, knowing if they don't follow them, they could endanger others. But even with the best protocols and player compliance, there are still certain factors out of team control.
Part of the challenge here is that, when you've seen one college, you've seen one, because the rates of transmission within every community is very different. And it's very different if you're in a community where the rate of transmission is relatively low than if you're in one that's still either peaking or still quite high.
Regardless of whether some teams end up playing, Coach Gigantino says there is one decision he's pleased with: the fact players are speaking up on critical issues.
But everybody always thought of me as too much of a player's coach. Well, like I always used to say, they're the ones that are playing. I'm the guy watching film sitting on my rear end somewhere. Okay, they're the ones that are playing. So I believe players should have a say.
Austin Kim, Newsy, Chicago.
If you have a moment, give me a shout on Twitter using the hashtag #NewsyInTheLoop. Let me know which schools you root for so I know who to root against. So you've gotten tested or treated for COVID-19. Newsy wants to hear from you about how much your treatment cost. Whether your bill was big or small, share your cost of COVID story by going to newsy.com/bills. If you've been online at all during this pandemic, you'll know that many people have been pretty open about how crappy things have been. I've seen plenty of memes about emotional instability and versions of the phrase, "it's okay to not be okay." As Newsy's Amber Strong reports, Americans are reporting higher levels of depression and anxiety than earlier in the year.
6 months into a global pandemic, Americans are becoming more stressed. And as we've heard before, stress plays a big role in mental health.
From May to July, it went from 39% to 53% of adults now saying that worry and stress from related to the pandemic has had a negative impact on their mental health.
The CDC has also kept track with the percentage of Americans experiencing the symptoms of depression or anxiety steadily increasing throughout the COVID shutdown. One way to consider the mental and emotional toll of the pandemic, consider how you felt at the start. How do you feel now? As a country, we've found ways to cope with the stress, oftentimes with humor. But the reality is a lot has happened in the last 6 months, and that has taken a toll.
What is going on in our country that couldn't affect someone's mental health?
According to Kaiser, 7 in 10 adults are stressed over finances. Parents are stressed over whether it's safe to send their kids to school. And then there's the grief of individual pain or seeing the pain of others.
grief is a really big thing. And that can be grief like somebody died grief, which is the typical way that we talk about grief. But that could also mean like loss of something you really wanted to do. So I really wanted to go on a vacation and I can't. That's a grief.
Racial injustice flooding social media, coupled with high unemployment numbers from the last job report, equal a unique effect on African Americans. 68% saying stress has had a negative impact on their mental health, higher than any other race surveyed.
If we couple sort of the current context of dealing with the pandemic on top of dealing with racism and these repeated exposures to these sort of incidents of police brutality, that all of those things can cause a significant toll on our functioning.
In a recent podcast, former First Lady Michelle Obama says the actions of the current administration, as well as racial strife in the country, have led to, quote, low-grade depression.
Waking up to the news, it is exhausting, and it has led to a weight that I haven't felt in my life in a while.
She copes by turning off the news for a while. Experts say that's a good thing.
People that are sort of constantly getting inundated by some of these messages and videos that can be really triggering, I think it's important that you decide to step away and take a break.
Experts say Mrs. Obama's admission was an important one, encouraging people, particularly African Americans, to seek help, whether it's due to an uptick in sadness due to recent events or major depressive disorder.
If we have a regulated system, no pre-existing diagnoses, and good coping, we can manage or buffer that stress. However, when there are multiple stressors at play, especially for a long time, that tends to wear on us.
There's never a wrong time to get help. So even if you feel like low-grade depression, you don't have to cross the threshold. And I think that's something we do mistake with mental health and physical health. We really wait for a crisis. And there is a crisis, it's called a pandemic.
Amber Strong, Newsy, Northern Virginia.
A big question on the minds of many Americans this week: is sending my kid back to in-person school really a safe move right now? Even though we know that children are less likely to suffer serious health impacts from the virus than adults, high numbers of kids testing positive for coronavirus over the past couple of weeks has given some experts cause for concern and cause for some skepticism over whether in-person school should be going on in parts of the country. Newsy's James Packard has more.
Just days into school reopenings, and already it's a bumpy start.
I've gotten threats and things like that.
A high school in Georgia is closed to in-person classes for at least 2 days after 9 cases of the coronavirus. It's the same school where photos of crowded hallways and maskless students got the student who captured it suspended before that decision was reversed.
I know that I'm doing the right thing, and it's not going to stop me from continuing doing it.
And in New York, about a quarter of families in the nation's largest school district are opting for totally remote learning, an indication of widespread skepticism schools can keep kids safe.
Healthy and safe in-person learning means knowing how many people we need to plan for in buildings.
Kids are testing positive for the coronavirus at a higher rate, and research suggests the impacts of the virus racially disparate, but more so than in adults.
While these disparities are larger than the ones that we see in adults, they mirror what we're seeing in adults. It's very reasonable that if you have Latino workers who are out there doing work, coming into contact with the virus and getting sick, that they bring that virus home to their children.
The American Academy of Pediatrics saying 97,000 kids tested positive in the last 2 weeks of July. That's a 40% increase in that period. But the report reveals the real number is likely higher.
When and ready and when safe, we will open classes. But I will say this, we won't do that overnight.
A June summer camp in Georgia, proof of the risk if proper protocol goes ignored. The CDC now confirming at least 260 cases of the coronavirus came after just 3 days of indoor and outdoor camping without face masks for campers. School districts are relying on federal or state guidance, not mandates, making a return very different school to school.
Look, it may just check off the boxes and be very simple for them to be able to return. And for other districts, it's going to require a more elaborate plan, a scheme.
But a safe return is possible, at least for some age groups. One college in Ohio touting 3 months of in-person instruction across more than 200 programs without a single case of the coronavirus.
All the
public spaces, handrails, doorknobs, very careful cleaning. We have cleaning supplies in all offices, and so every day, we all clean our own workspaces.
And masks, experts say, critical for safe learning. James Packard, Newsy, Chicago.
We here at In the Loop love just taking a breather. Maybe some deep yoga breathing. Just don't close your eyes for too long.
Every patient was a dollar sign. It wasn't about how well was the treatment done. It was about how much did you make on that treatment.
On a personal basis, I've watched them drilling perfectly healthy teeth.
I do not think I was an aggressive dentist.
Losing your perfectly healthy teeth. How dare you try to do that to me?
We're not really sure that Wall Street is the best place to make medical decisions for us.
Nothing's wrong with making money. If you're doing it ethically, absolutely not.
Every year, millions of people take part in a very specific kind of lottery. If their number is called, you get one of 55,000 diversity visas from the US. But a new policy shift from the Trump administration, which freezes visa issuances through the end of the year, jeopardizes visa chances for 2020 winners. Newsy's Austin Landis has more.
A federal judge here in Washington, D.C. says there's no time to waste for thousands of people promised a new life in the U.S. They were chosen for diversity visas, randomly selected out of millions of applicants across the world. Now their visas are on hold, and they risk losing them entirely after a policy shift from President Trump. Jivan Pudel and his wife Sujana have been preparing to move to the U.S. since the moment they got married in December.
I think, in my opinion, we liked each other. Yes, we liked each other.
He says the U.S. diversity visa lottery is a coveted ticket where he lives in Nepal, and he's applied year after year.
I think 7-8 times, and that's why I was not selected. But this year, luckily, I was selected.
Jivan was first notified he won, along with about 50,000 others, more than a year ago. But a few months ago, his excitement vanished.
Then I think that was the nightmare. All of the hopes simply ruined, destroyed.
President Trump issued an order in April putting a pause on most visas, including diversity visas, the intent to create more jobs for Americans. He later extended the pause through the end of this year. The problem is, lottery selections don't carry over from year to year. They have to be issued by September 30th, or they disappear. And that's why more than 1,000 diversity visa winners are suing. In a call last week, the DC judge overseeing the lawsuit said, "We don't have the luxury of briefing this out over weeks or months," and said a resolution needs to come quickly. Do you think there needs to be some kind of quick decision here?
No, I don't think there is really any urgency to resolve this matter. After all, in this particular visa category, it's people who, by definition, don't have family sponsors or employment sponsors.
Jessica Vaughn of the anti-immigration think tank Center for Immigration Studies says the administration is within its rights to reverse these visas.
To make sure that the millions of Americans who have lost their jobs, either temporarily or permanently, because of the economic shutdown, have first crack at jobs and getting themselves into the labor market again before any new immigrants arrive.
One of the lawyers on the case tells Newsy they're hoping to have the visa deadline extended by another year to give lottery winners more time. That includes Jivan and Sujana. Instead, Jivan says after joining the lawsuit, his case status changed from processing to refused, but he still has hope.
We are very much hopeful that American judiciary system will preserve or will protect our dream.
Judge Amit Mehta isn't expected to make a ruling until the end of August at the earliest. That would leave just a month until the approval for thousands of visa winners goes away. Austin Landis, Newsy, Washington.
That's it for us, gang. Join us tomorrow, same time, same place for more In the Loop. Top stories from Newsy are headed your way right now.